Yeah, so this is going to be the very first episode of the
Like, what is your goal?
League of...
What do you want to talk about?
Well, that's what we're going to talk about. That's
Yeah,
what we're
you're
going to talk
muted.
about. We're going to talk about what we're going to talk about. So this is the
Yeah.
very first episode of the League of Ordinary Jabronis Dynasty podcast, and it's going to be really ad hoc and off the cuff and random, and we're going to talk about whatever we want to talk about.
What's up,
Bet.
jabronis?
I think that generally for this podcast, we're going to talk about the matchups and kind of our reaction to the games that happen throughout the season and the fantasy implications of each team, kind of track the progress, and it could be a video record of what happened back in the day, and we can look back on this and think, wow, this was produced horribly.
What idiots we were.
What idiots we were. And I can't believe that Scott picked Kyle Pitts. That was a horrible pick.
What a dummy.
Yeah. So I think that the biggest thing about this league is going to be IDP and how much variance there is with
Yes.
IDP.
Why don't you start off by explaining how you've messed with the IDP rulings, how it's different in our league, because it's not the same as other IDP leagues at all.
We have a very different system.
So the thing about IDP is that there's not a lot of resources out there for learning about, say, what players to pick up after games and what kind of the draft tiers are, because it's kind of been figured out for offense. Like, there's a science behind which players that you're going to end up picking and everything. But with IDP, because every league has different rules, like the scoring formats are completely different, it's really difficult to find resources on defensive players. So when we designed the scoring format for the IDP position, it was kind of, what experience have we had with defensive players in the past? And Steve and I have played in leagues where defensive players are used, but the problems we noticed with those leagues is that linebackers were far and away the most important position, way more important than linemen and defensive backs. So the idea behind the scoring format that we ended up going with was to try and reach some level of parity between the three positions that defensive players can be in. So,
and also some parity with the offensive players too.
Yeah, because we didn't want defensive players to just kind of be this thing you just tack on at the end of your team and you don't really think about it, because that's not fun, and defense is half the game. So we had to reward them somehow. But the problem is how do you reward points to a defensive player? Because the idea behind a fantasy player is, what are they doing statistically that pushes their team towards winning a game? And with offense, that's obvious. They catch balls, they gain yardage, scrimmage yards, they don't turn the ball over, things like that. They score points. It's obvious. But with defense, it's a little different because they can't score points unless they run the ball into the end zone or score a safety, right? So
Well, I guess in my mind, it's a lot easier to read what how good a defense is and what people are overthinking it, right? Because I feel like if there was a way for them to score it with the preventing of yards, right? So defenses prevent yards, they prevent first downs. Obviously, they get picks, sacks, half sacks, tackles, loss of yardage. So if they get a loss of yard play, I feel like there's a better ways to score it. But with the way that it's set up now, it's good for now, obviously. But I feel like things are kind of overthought on defense. It's a lot easier to see what they're doing than people think.
There's also a real big difference between thinking about defense as a team effort. So like in terms of redraft, right, we mostly have team defenses. Whereas the IDP as a whole, like, we're really starting in individual players, right? And so it's harder to quantify, like, oh, did this player like directly make the second down tackle that was necessary to make that 3 and out?
Well, I mean, of course. You think about impact players like Aaron Donald.
When we know that those players exist, but that doesn't get recorded in the statistics in a meaningful way that could be leveraged for fantasy.
I understand
so
that.
Like, that's the unfortunateness, is that we're limited by the data set that we can use to generate any sort of kind of point total.
Right.
But,
so Steve and I looked at the statistics for some other leagues, because Steve runs an IDP league, and then Steve and I play in a couple other leagues too where IDP is used. And really, we found that the players that got a lot of tackles were the ones that scored the most points overall, despite sacks and pass defense and other things. It was like far and away, you get tackles, you're the best player in IDP. Like in the fantasy side of things, that was money. So the idea behind the way that we did the scoring was, if they make a play that does something other than tackle that improves the chances for their team to score points, they get a lot of points for it. So that's why fumble recoveries and forced fumble, like if you get a fumble recovery and a forced fumble, so say your linebacker or defensive back runs in and punches the ball out, and that team ends up retrieving the ball on that play, they get 8 points, which is, we understand, more than a touchdown's worth of points, but it's hard to really balance in the grand scheme of things the linebackers with defensive backs and linemen, because if they're just scoring based on tackles, they're not really scoring enough to be relevant, and no one's going to really think about it or care. So that's why pass defense is going to be scoring big chunk points in fantasy. That's why if they get a touchdown, it scores a boatload of points.
In standard IDP stuff, right?
No, in standard IDP, they don't score anything.
Those are depreciated.
Yeah.
You get 2 points per pass defense, and in our scoring, you get considerably more than that. But in our scoring, it emphasizes these players, and it emphasizes them doing stuff that they would normally be doing throughout the course of the game.
Right, because they're actually impacting the actual game.
Exactly. Right. So it's
when you think about
mid up and batting a ball down or deflecting a pass. That's a huge impact to the game. That's a loss of down.
That's effectively
or an interception chance, and that's going to count as a pass defense.
Yeah,
and potentially the interception for another individual player.
A pass defense is basically the same thing as a sack for 0 yards.
Yep.
And the thing is the IDP scoring on the formats that we've been playing with, it's like that doesn't really reflect it in terms of the impact that it has. So
right, and that's actually a really key point, right? Is that for offensive scoring, we're reflecting kind of the precise movement of the game, whereas in defensive scoring, it's really more about impact and momentum. Right, as opposed to like a 1-for-1 translation of yards equals points, touchdowns equals points.
So the thing that's going to be really crazy about IDP in this league is there's going to be extreme variance with your week-to-week performance of your players, which makes me really worried about the projections, because the projections seem to suggest that it's like either they get a sack or they don't. Like, the Vegas lines for these players are what the values for the projections are based off of, generally. So if they're projected to get a sack, they're probably going to be a 10-point per week player. But most weeks, they're probably not going to get a sack. They're probably going to get a handful of tackles, which means that you're probably going to get like 6 points from your guy, generally. But you're going to have really streaky players that will get like 30 points. Because they'll get three pass breakups and a fumble recovery under their belt, or they'll get a pick six. They get a pick six.
Yeah, I mean, we have IDP touchdowns as 10 points.
Yep.
Again, like, it's such an impactful moment.
The thing is that is an impactful moment in the game, and it's going to be massive for fantasy, because that's going to decide a week. Like, if your defensive player gets a pick six, that's going to decide your week, most
in
likely.
a lot of ways. I mean, that 10 points is a huge benefit.
Right. But the thing is that's going to happen like once a year for your guy.
Probably.
There's only a handful of pick sixes that happen during the whole season. So I think that we got it right mostly. I do think that there's going to be some growing pains with the scoring. I think that it's going to be fun, but I think there's also going to be some pain associated with this format because none of us have played with this type of scoring before, and there's definitely going to be some adjustments in the future.
Yeah, we acknowledge it's a work in progress, right? And we reserve the right to make the changes that we feel is the most appropriate. But of course, all changes to scoring will go to a vote.
Yeah, everything goes to a vote for sure.
We'll keep everybody in the
But
loop.
we also want people to give feedback. Like if there's things that you see statistically, like if you look into the players and you notice that we've clearly got something wrong with how the scoring system works and how a player ends up being ranked, let us know. You'd be like, look, dude, this guy isn't that good, but he's an absolute monster with the settings that you guys have picked. I think this should be different.
We need to know
listen
about
to that, you know,
use cases because it matters for making this right. And I mean, and I mean, just like we were saying when we started this whole conversation, is we're really treading some unproven ground here.
Yeah, uncharted territories.
Exactly, new paths to be blazed. And
blazed for sure.
Yeah, in my case,
I wish. Dude, I wish.
The funny thing is, when we were first looking at this, the players that we saw with the scoring format we copied from a kind of generic IDP format. Like basically, if you go in and you enable IDP and the default settings that are there, the players that we saw floating at the top were really confusing to us. The players that were objectively bad football players were
some
top
of the best
picks.
IDP,
Absolute beasts. But then when we changed it around, we looked at the top 10, the top 50, the top 100, and it was like, okay, this makes more sense. Players like Nick Bosa and Max Crosby are the guys, right?
Well,
and that's what we would expect.
Right?
The people you want to watch, right?
Yeah.
When we're talking about a 12-team dynasty league where we have, 6 IDP spots, we're really only talking about the first 100 or so players that are going to be rostered generally, aside from those deep sleep
starting anyways.
Starting precisely. And I mean, even then there are starting caliber players still on the waiver wire, that are starting in defenses right now, sort of depreciated positions. I mean, Jair Alexander is sitting on the waiver wire, I think. If he's not on my roster, then Rasul Douglas is sitting on the waiver wire. I mean, these are starting cornerbacks, but they're still not projected high.
That's part of
the thing is we're gonna see some of these things because there's gonna be more PBUs on these a lot of the time, and the projected points aren't necessarily catching that. So there's gonna be a lot of volatility, and we're gonna be watching the waiver wire very closely to see kind of how this goes. But
with how
there was going to be depth on the
with how many players we have to pick, it's kind of hard to not have some stuff on the wire because our bench isn't that big in retrospect to how many players we have to field.
Exactly.
So it's kind of insane.
We have a tough needle to thread here in roster construction. And it's definitely intentionally difficult, right? Where you're going to want a lot of dual position guys, especially for defense, in order to cover those holes.
The hope was that we wouldn't have teams just trading with the waiver wire. We want people to have depth, but we also want them to have to look at other rosters and make decisions about who they're going to trade for. And people will need to be comfortable with giving up draft capital for players. So...
yeah, I can't wait for that, to be honest with you, because it's finally something that because we've only been doing, at least I've only been doing over the last 5 years, redraft leagues, and so finally being able to have draft capital to trade rather than just having to give up a great player, or now I can kind of say, hey, take this semi upper mid tier player and some of my draft capital and let me try and go for it,
right? Because with Dynasty, age is also a part of the
Tremendous
player's
factor.
profile that you have to care about, because when you put a player on your roster, that's forever potentially. You can
What?
roster a player
Until
for
they
their
retire or you trade
entire
them.
career.
Yeah, you could.
Yeah.
Until they retire, you drop them or you trade them. That's how
So-
long that player is on
so
your
with
roster.
redraft-
Season after season.
With
We're not
redraft, you
doing that
can
draft again.
right, because with redraft, you look at a player's age and it's like, well, they're this old this year. And when you draft them, you think about their average draft position and their output and their injury history based on in the context of how old they are now. With Dynasty, it's a lot different, because when you're making a trade package, it's like, well, I can give you, I want your 5-year starting wide receiver who's been good, but I'm going to give you my rookie that I drafted or whatever, who's an up and coming proven guy or not proven guy. And I'll give you this other proven guy who's maybe a wide receiver 2 for your wide receiver 1. So the strategies with how you do your roster is going to change a lot, especially because there won't be parity in this league in 5 years. There will be a clear cut upper cream of the crop rosters that are perennial champions.
Winners. Yeah.
There's going to be people that are going to be in the championship every year, and there's going to be people that are going to go through years of my team sucks and I need to rebuild.
Look,
So
for every Kansas City Chiefs, there is a New York Jets.
exactly,
And
that's going to happen in
the
this
way it
fantasy
goes.
league.
Yeah, not everyone can be amazing. I mean, those high draft picks are going to be worth a lot, especially with
five years from now.
Yeah, I mean, and that's the thing, is we don't know how it's going to shake out right now. We can maybe make some informed guesses, but
We could speculate all day about it,
we
right?
can speculate. But that's the thing. It's like we're not going to know until the first season shakes out, and like fantasy is ultimately a roll of the dice, right? I mean, as much
I
as
think-
we like to say the NFL is rigged,
I think if it was like a regular
the
dynasty league
it's different.
where there's no defensive players, like especially the way we have it set up now, you could swing a whole game with just defense, because
Yeah.
I mean, people are just gonna be picking the projected point values for each player, right? But that doesn't. None of those players are gonna hit that projected. They're gonna be like,
Yeah, it's a total crapshoot.
within a few
right?
points of that projected, or
It's
way
an
over that projected, and so
an
you could
estimation.
sweep.
At
Yeah.
best. Absolutely. Yeah. Well, and it's going to be so easy for defenses to get swingy, because
Yeah.
like there's a such thing in offensive game planning where you're just like, oh, we're definitely going to target that guy, and if you've got that guy on your roster that's getting targeted and happens to make, even if he gets, because with the IDP scoring, if he gets 3 pass breakups, that's a great game for him.
Yeah.
IDP wise, and he could give up. I mean, like Eli Apple in this circumstance could give up, 200 yards, but have 3 PBUs and be an IDP
Right.
star in this scoring system.
And if you guys thought it was tough before watching your defense play against your top 2 offensive players, wait until your best defensive player absolutely destroys your offense.
Quarterback.
That's a
Yeah.
good point,
Wait
because
till your
you're
guy
going to be
sucks,
thinking a
man.
lot more about matchups with the defensive players, because with your offensive players, it's like start your studs. Like you got Pat Mahomes, you just play him. But like when it comes to your defensive players, you have players that are so good potentially that they just won't see any action, because the offensive coordinator is going to be like, we can't throw to that side of the field.
I mean,
And
that's
he's going to be covering our second
on
option.
waiver wire, right? I mean, like, so the game plan skews away from action for one player, and they're going to be projected lower.
Yeah, this is where defensive schemes, actual offenses, like
It
understanding
really helps
plays and how certain offenses operate are really going to come into play.
And that's one of the reasons we really wanted to include IDP in this way.
It's not just, oh, hey, this guy is good percentage wise thanks to IBM telling me what he's done over the last 5 years.
Right.
Now you actually need to know football.
Exactly.
Which I love.
It cultivates that level of understanding in the game when you have to think about it in fantasy, and it deepens the experience of football altogether. And that's like, for me, that's a lot of the joy of it, right?
Yeah.
So you might have noticed that the starting positions include a single linebacker and a flex.
Yep.
The reason why we did this is because we understand that linebackers are going to be the heavy hitters. Like at the end of the season, and then you'll notice this every season,
You
generally
can see it already.
half of the top end players are going to be linebackers. So we wanted to offer more importance to the other defensive positions, defensive line and defensive back, by requiring you to start more. So while the flex, the IDP flex, I should say, is a position where you can put in either a lineman or a defensive back, most likely what everyone's going to be doing is putting linebacker there. And that was kind of the intention.
That's really likely, but I mean,
It's
you just
kind
have
of like
the
offensively, how you have the flex, you're putting wide receivers in there. You know what I mean? Generally, you're going to put a wide receiver in your flex. It's going to be the same with linebacker and the IDP flex.
Depending, right? Because like there are some good enough running backs.
Sometimes
if you grab enough of them.
Oh,
you have
obviously,
three
and that's the
RB1s,
case
and you-
with the IDP too. There's going to be DBs that are just monsters.
Yeah, they're just absurd. I
Yeah.
mean,
like for example,
week
week 4 rolls around. I'm gonna have Austin Eckler, Joe Mixon, and Alvin Kamara. You think I'm not throwing Alvin in my flex?
Absolutely.
Like you got like he's absolutely going in my flex.
Yeah,
Sure.
no kidding. Jamal Williams stock falls.
For real.
So going over to
Steals
the
your
sleeper
touchdown.
platform was a big change. And
It's so
Yeah.
weird.
I'm really curious how everyone's feeling about it so far, because I've had my own frustrations with it. The
It's
waivers
better.
are so confusing.
The UI is awful.
The UI is definitely, it's designed for mobile app, and
Yeah.
even then,
Yeah.
it doesn't work on every like it's designed for your phone. I noticed
It's
that if
designed
I use
for-
it on a tablet,
It's
It's
the
a
same
mess.
as honestly the UI is the same on an Android as it is on my desktop. So I don't
Yeah.
know if it's maybe
that's intentional, and it's
That's-
because they don't have a
that's
web,
exactly it.
they don't have a desktop version of their application.
well, I was saying I don't know if the Apple version of it's different
No, it's
or
the
not.
same. It's
It's the same.
Yeah.
It's all exactly the
Okay.
same.
So then it's just trash all around.
The
But
problem
Sleeper
though,
used to be a lot better before they added all of this gambling integration, and all of that shit has just janked up everything. So
yeah,
it's like, okay, cool. You stopped paying attention to the thing that made your platform good.
yeah,
fuck
but
us.
that's where the money is. But
exactly.
that's a
That's how
different
they-
conversation
that's how it
entirely. I don't
goes.
even really
But-
want to get into
but-
because I
the
can't
point is,
even bet
yeah, lots of-
in Washington. So.
Yeah, can't even deal with it.
yeah, it's bullshit.
Yeah.
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 Let's go to Snoqualmie Casino, everybody, and go and bet on teams. That sounds like so
Yeah.
much fun.
I'm not trying to
But-
drive to Snoqualmie to place a prop bet. That just sounds
Oh,
trash.
fuck. I mean, I know people who do that, and more power to it.
Let's go hit some parlays this weekend, boys.
It
Come
ain't
on.
Wait, I guess it's different when you have the casino, like 5 minutes outside of your town, but it's a little bit different. But yeah, the sleeper has a lot of problems, but I think
Like
ultimately
the desktop application is actually worse than the mobile app. There, you can do less in the mobile app
Yeah.
or in the desktop
In the
application than you
Yeah,
can
yeah, yeah.
in the mobile application.
Like, did you
Which
guys
I
look?
don't understand that.
Did you guys look
Yeah,
at
yeah.
the preseason scoring for our league, by the way, at all?
What do you mean, like the projections, or
So like Breon Borders scored 41 points at DB.
Yeah.
Week 1 preseason.
Yep, there's gonna be some wild shit coming out.
Yeah,
Like
that's what I was saying in the beginning of
It's
this segment.
swingy.
Is it's gonna be something that is people are gonna say things to me.
Yeah, no, like get ready, like
So you're going
it's
to be sitting there like, oh, what do you mean? This guy was projected to get 6 points. He scored 43. Like, your shit's broken. I'm
what
going to be like, dude,
Good
look
luck.
at the scoring. Like, what did he do? He's like, well, he only got 4 sacks and 3 pass breakups and a pick
He
6. I'm
did
like,
get a pick
that
six.
sounds like a 40-point
Like, oh, it sounds like you got a
40-point
lot.
player to me, bro. Like,
You got a pick
it's going to
six.
happen.
I mean, and that's the thing too with preseason is that there are a lot more pick sixes in preseason.
Okay, you have glorified college teams out there. So as far as everyone's teams, I wanted to talk about some specifics here because there's a lot. You could tell there's a lot of different strategies that people went into here, and I wanted to call out Kelsey's team as being one of my favorites because her strategy was so crazy. It's just wide receivers. Like you look at her wide receiver depth, and it's like, holy shit. If you want a wide receiver, just hit her up because she's got them all. I also liked.
Yeah, no kidding.
I also liked Trevor's strategy of just drafting old men.
Hey man,
I
go with the veterans, man. In my opinion,
funny.
You gotta go with the veterans.
We'll see how long. I mean, who are the young guys that you have on your team? Eckler's kind of young. I mean, no, I guess 6 years in the league. He's old for a running back.
For a running back, that's a lot of tread.
Yeah, 4 years.
Yeah, I think Higgins is probably my youngest.
Watt is
starter.
Oh god, I can't believe he's been in the league.
No, he's on his way. I'm pretty sure Higgins is like the youngest player I have on my team.
You could tell that the thought process was there for some people, like
I'm looking at
the Aaron Rodgers pick by Joe. It was really interesting.
Yeah, that's fun.
I don't understand that one personally. But
the thing is that the what I'm going to own up to is the mistake in quarterback scoring that was overlooked is going to definitely help an Aaron Rodgers type person who's entering the Drew Brees stage of his career.
Yeah, let's talk about that for a minute. So the scoring that we wanted to go for here was to award first down play because, in my opinion, it's a better bridge between PPR and half point PPR. Is you just give points, you give a half point for the reception, and then you give another half point for the first down. And I wanted to award first down points for players that are moving the chains. Like that's one of the things that you want to emphasize in fantasy scoring systems is doing things on the field to help your team win a game. And moving the chains is absolutely one of the best things you can do to help your team win a game. So we gave quarterbacks that bonus. And it's looking initially like that was kind of a mistake because quarterback scoring is now inflated a little bit.
No. There's a really important distinction here, is that there's a bonus for receiving first downs, a bonus for rushing first downs, and then a bonus for passing first downs. And
it's the passing first downs.
We were going to have the receiving and rushing first downs at a half point, regardless. But we forgot. We thought that at first that we would just throw it at a half point on each to give it parity across, but we neglected how much additional scoring that would concentrate onto the quarterbacks.
Right. So right now what we're looking at are inflated projections. Like we haven't actually played with this system in place yet, and I'm actually still okay with leaving this in, potentially next season and going forward, just because of how important it is for a quarterback to be good. You want to have a good quarterback. And the other plus, like an argument for keeping this setting that I am happy with personally, is it squeezes the skill gap. It squeezes the importance a little bit between the running quarterbacks that throw and the pure passing quarterbacks. It kind of moves those two together in terms of their ranking and output just a little bit, because you have a rushing quarterback like Lamar Jackson or Josh Allen or Jalen Hurts, who's going to get a lot of points from rushing and rushing touchdowns. But then you have your Kirk Cousins of the world that are really good passers, but they don't rush that often. Okay.
Hey,
they don't rush that often, but they throw a lot of passes. And I think that
he's Mr. Consistent.
There's too much of an emphasis in fantasy football in dual threat quarterbacks, but with the half point passing points, it gives them a little bit more value, because the Tom Brady's of the world are really good quarterbacks, but they're not as good as a quarterback that can rush too.
Right.
So I'm
See,
interested to see how it pans
But I
out.
still think
see,
it's part of the normal
you,
quarterback kit
I
to
think
scramble for a first down. I mean, I don't think we would call Aaron Rodgers a rushing quarterback, but he still does like quite a bit of those like.
Are you
little
still
first down
talking about that old man that betrayed
The old
you right
man
now?
with broken ankles.
But Aaron Rodgers is a good example of this. The dude doesn't rush.
No, but he scampers.
He scampers, but he's not doing what Justin Fields. He's not doing.
No,
He's also not as young as Justin Fields.
no, and
I mean, look at Russell Wilson's trajectory, right? He was one of those quarterbacks that needed to be mobile.
No, but like my point is that this is a new thing in quarterbacking, even like among
Rushing?
mobile quarterbacks.
No, it's not. Tarkenton back in the fucking late '80s and early '90s was doing this shit on the Seahawks, dude.
That's true.
So it's not a new concept
Everything
at all.
old is new again.
It became more popular in 2006.
Right.
And it has only since gotten progressively better because more and more teams have started using it.
Yeah.
I mean, think about
Newton model.
Michael Vick.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
I mean, come on. He was like the poster child when we were growing up for scramble football.
He was the
Yeah.
guy
You know what I mean?
back in the day.
Yeah.
So
It's
saying
always, you're right.
that
It's
is
always
new
existed
is
in the game, but it's the proliferation is rather new.
it's we have more than one or two quarterbacks doing it. We have 5, 6 quarterbacks doing it now. The safety protocols that have been put in place so that we can make more plays like that, on top of the fact that play action offenses are now the most popular offense in the league.
Proliferation
And-
of play action and the Shanahan style offense for sure has affected that.
Which came from those great years of college, coaches that are now in the NFL, bringing that into the NFL.
Right.
And so, and here pretty soon, about 2 to 5 years. I don't know how much you've been watching in the college, but the Wildcat is coming back.
It is.
And we're gonna see a lot more Wildcat plays happening.
It's already creeping into the NFL too. I mean, like
We've been
over
seeing
the last
it more
2
over
or
the last
3
3 or 4
years,
years for
it's
sure.
definitely
Yeah.
been upticking. I mean, like going from it being like this is an obscure thing 3 or 4 years
Because I remember doing it in high school. I remember we did it all the
Right.
time in high school, and you never saw pros back then do a Wildcat. That was just not a thing.
No, you would not see that.
But now, I mean, why not, right?
Yeah, exactly. If you've got a guy who can handle
Who
it.
can pull it off?
I mean, shoot, the San Francisco was doing it
Yeah,
for
deep-
an entire quarter in a playoff game. because they were forced to, but
Yeah.
I mean, that counts, right? Like
Of course. If you have the talent, they can pull it off. Why
they
not?
had some effectiveness at it.
So, as far as it goes with the scoring format and how we have a quarterback position that's potentially a little overpowered, I don't know how it's going to end up panning out in the long run. I don't know if people are going to enjoy this setting or if people are going to say we should just get rid of it or lower it to a quarter point.
We may end up having to make it 1D or 1 DB, 1 LB, 2 DL. Because DBs.
I'm talking about the quarterback scoring.
I'm talking about the scoring in general. With how it is right now, I feel like I love how many defensive players that we have going, and the QB scoring is great. But I don't think that's even a problem. I don't even see how anyone, because we got to have some give and play, right? If we have all these defensive players getting 20 to 30 points a game, we need something on the offense that's going to counterbalance that a little bit.
It's really important to emphasize how rare and flashes in the pan those are.
It won't be though.
If we look at
The thing is, you're starting one quarterback and there's 32 teams. There's no depth.
Yeah.
There's not enough depth at the quarterback position. That's the concern. Is that there's not enough depth at the quarterback position to make enough scarcity for there to be a market.
Well, right. But those people that picked those quarterbacks in the beginning of the draft sacrificed better running backs, better receivers. You know what I'm saying?
That's true.
So, because if you reach for a quarterback in the first 2 rounds, and you're not getting the top tier receiver or running back, And there's only, I'd say 5 to 7 running backs that are really viable for, we'll say, tier 1, and then 10 receivers that are really going to put up a ton of points every single game.
Sure.
And after that, that's it. So if you messed around and picked a quarterback, or not messed around, because it's a viable option, especially with people like Patrick Mahomes and Josh Allen, you know?
They run like crazy, like Jalen Hurts and Lamar Jackson and
see, I don't think I think Lamar is too old. I think he's hurt. He got hurt last year. He's gonna do exactly what every other scramble style running back, I just call them running backs, scramble style QB has ever done, and they get hurt and they get smart and they stop doing it as much and they stay in the pocket and they learn how to throw the ball because they don't want to get hurt. The second I got my first real injury in football, they all just snowballed after that. And it's always been like this thing in football that's just how it is. You get one and then you just get plagued with them for the rest of your career.
It all comes down to luck, I think. And
it comes with conditioning. How much were you doing in the off season? Were you actually doing the PT?
All of that counts, but like it's about influencing a chance. Right.
Of course. Lamar could come out and fucking prove me wrong. Obviously this is on a podcast, so maybe in a year you guys are fucking laughing at me. But you know what? In my opinion, I think he's gonna have to really read the book, get better at passing, start stepping back in the pocket, and letting the line protect him. Because the Ravens can't push him into the ground like that, or he won't last another 3 years. He won't. There is no way. And I understand people were saying that 3 years ago when he first started, or 4 years ago, whatever it was. But that was when he was young, spry chicken, right? That was when he could actually move.
Right.
That was before he got hit 1,000 times.
Yeah, I mean we're already seeing the rise of his backups as viable handcuffs. All right, what are we seeing with some of these matchups? Are there any ones that look particularly spicy?
You mean even with my Jalen Carter being projected 0, which is not going to happen week 1.
Yeah.
I'm already like 15 points projected over the preposterous perpetrators of that. So I know my matchup looks kind of ridiculous.
Pretty spicy.
Like I was saying earlier, the defensive scoring is going to swing a lot of this, and I think more so with really this setting more than ever, it's going to be ignore the projections. You have a shot every week.
Yeah, I know. The closest matchup that I can see is between the Blubberbuds and the Dharma Initiative, which is Joe and Josh respectively, I'm pretty sure. Yeah. And they're pretty much, it's a 50-50 shot between who's going to win that week.
That's what the AI says, but I don't know, honestly.
There's a good deal of parity. Like when you look at their players side by side, it's like this could go either way. We got a coin flip, so we will watch that, and then next week we'll follow up on the Blubber Bowl.
Can we talk about how Danny is like projected to be 20 points higher than everybody in the league?
See, that's what happens when you pick Lamar Jackson, Nick Chubb, Derrick Henry, Cooper Kupp, like all of these players that have baked in statistically, and a lot of us are sitting here with their like unproven rookies or first year or second year guys that are like, are they good? Yes.
Or veterans that they think are falling off.
Yeah, veterans that have been signed to a new team that are still good.
He's basically got a whole team full of dudes who are fantastic in fantasy, but and a lot of whom are household names, but also like some of the unsung heroes, like a Brandon Cooks, new in Dallas. Like, yeah, okay.
However, he does have Cooper Kupp, and I don't think Cooper Kupp is going to be getting 14 points or even play. Yeah, his hamstring's so jacked up. He might go out the second quarter and be I'm frozen.
He apparently visited with a specialist that knows a lot about soft tissue, these types of soft tissue injuries. So
which
We
isn't
will find
usually
more
a
this
good
week.
look.
That's not a
I
good
mean,
sign. That's
No.
bad.
Usually not
That's
a good
bad.
sign.
That's a
but
red
really
arrow.
bad.
especially, like
He took
that's
an arrow to
usually-
the hamstring,
Like
bro.
that.
literally.
Yeah, I used to be a football player. But yeah, I mean, there's some wild projections.
That,
You know,
from what you know,
Hayward
I
and
mean,
Garrett are basically both projected to have a sack. Basically, here, which may or may not materialize. Jenkins is one of those like short tackling safeties. So
or how about the fact because we drafted so early, and I was banking on Kareem Hunt getting signed, he never got signed.
yeah, there were some dice rolls that came out. That definitely may or may not have
Some panned
materialized.
out. Like if you invested in Cook, it worked out. Old Dalvin came through with his Noah Labrum having ass and
Yeah.
got signed to the Jets somehow. So
Fucking old man squad. Aaron Rodgers is old man squad.
the Jets are basically Trevor's fantasy team.
In real life,
In
though,
real
Not-
life.
I don't have any Jet players.
Or the Buccaneers team that won it all that one year. That was
mean,
basically the philosophy
man
of Trevor's
squad.
fantasy team.
Facts.
Yeah.
They just like give us your old
Grab
name.
all the
Who-
veterans and see what we can do.
We'll take Leonard Fournette and whatever is left of Julio Jones' hamstrings.
They
We need
really
them.
started with a good half
And Mi-
of Green Bay's
And Mike Evans' elbows.
on top
Mike
of it.
Evans' elbows.
Like the Jets roster is half former Packers players. I swear to God.
Yeah, because they built a team around him. That was the whole
Yeah.
point. He said that he didn't want to go there unless they would let him build the
Unless they
team.
do it, yeah. So it's the true blue GM Aaron Rodgers experiment.
So what's the over/under on a Djax bomb touchdown this year? You taking the over or the under on that one?
I'm taking the under.
You don't think so?
No. I mean, maybe I'm wrong here, but I doubt it.
He's gonna take over after Odell Beckham Jr. doesn't do anything.
Well, of course he's gonna do nothing.
Djax.
Odell's gonna get 5 touchdowns and another torn ACL. And
That does seem like
Call it a
They
career.
need to have
I'm
as
a
many
proud owner
torn
of Odell
ACLs as he
Beckham
does
Jr.
touchdowns this year. Then
I just
that dude,
oh fuck.
I can't.
it's all right. He'll be
As
sitting.
long as he gets
He'll be sitting
1,000
out in
yards on the way
Cabo.
there.
So how do you guys feel the rookie draft went? Do you think the linear snake draft after the startup draft? Do you think that was fair? How we did it? We reversed the order. It was linear, so it doesn't snake like the real NFL.
I don't think that there was.
It seems a
problem
lot of
with
people
that.
dropped some of their picks already, so I don't know.
Yeah, there was who dropped picks?
There was a couple,
I mean,
like fifth rounders. I think a couple fifth
yeah,
rounders
maybe
got
some
dropped.
fifth round rookies got dropped.
Yeah,
But
because there's already people from preseason that look promising, you know.
yeah, absolutely.
But it's going to be interesting come next season with cleanup because you're going to have to make cuts in order to keep your players you draft next year. So I'm interested to see if we have to make some changes to our bench, if the taxi squad rules are working.
Well,
I'm interested to see what
really-
happens because like the taxi squad is going to be a very strategic tool. People are going to have to learn to utilize.
Make sure you're setting that in the next.
The other thing that you need to make
time
sure
before
you're
it's Tuesday.
doing is leveraging your taxi squad as
You need-
prospect pool.
make sure that that's
Don't put your
prospect.
don't put your guy that's a starter
anybody that-
already on there. You know what
Yeah,
I mean?
exactly.
Like
Somebody
Bijan
who's made
Robinson
their
is
way
not
in
a taxi
preseason,
squad guy.
Don't put them there. Yeah, don't do that. No, your taxi squad is for that dude who showed out in the preseason that you fell in love with, and
Or like that
you're
tight
crushing
end
on,
that takes a couple
and they're
years
the third, they're the
roll
third
up.
string, you know,
Right.
on their team right now, and you're like, okay, well, this is not going to be fantasy relevant this year, but maybe next year when both of those dudes' contracts are up and he knows the offense fully, yeah, they're going to wheel him out and make sure that he's still a god.
Yeah,
And
my personal
that's when I want to
strategy.
reevaluate that.
So is the taxi squad locked?
They
No,
lock. It locks.
Because
It locks.
I can't, I can't
it's
switch
not
out.
locked yet.
So
I can't switch.
Yeah.
I can't switch out Jalen Carter and Mingo right now.
You can. You just have to move them to your bench,
To the bench.
and then switch in a new guy.
Yeah, they have to.
You can't
It
flip
has
flop.
to. It has to mediate through the bench.
Yeah.
Okay.
Everything runs through the bench, but Sleeper always lets you be over and make certain roster moves.
You're just
Like,
unable to move a player into your active roster when you're over the roster limit,
Right.
Unless it goes into your IR. And then you also cannot make waiver acquisitions if you have an invalid roster. So you have to be within. You have to have a valid roster in order to modify your starting lineup.
There are some creative ways you can utilize that. Excuse me.
Yes. So, like, what I've done is I've taken players that I drafted and I switched in players I drafted in the rookie draft. Sorry, I took players that I drafted in the startup draft and I switched them in the taxi squad with players I drafted in my rookie draft.
I was just able to do it. So you do have, you pull them to your bench and then you can do it. Because I just wanted to test it out to see if, like.
Yep. So my strategy is players that I don't think will be of immediate use to me go in the taxi squad, and if I have to promote them, I have to make room for them. But I try and keep the players I drafted that I might end up using in my lineup. So I encourage people around the league to look at the taxi squad as a thing you could use to expand your bench and add more depth to your team while thinking for the future, building for the future.
Exactly.
That's the intent, because it's something that no one that hasn't played Dynasty before on Sleeper probably has used. So it's a little weird because it seems right now like it's like a expended part of your bench, but as soon as the season starts, the taxi squad locks, and then you can't do anything with it. You can move players out at any time, but you can't move them back in. As soon as you move it out, it vacates that taxi squad slot, and you can't put a guy back in there.
Right.
So you have to be very strategic now because you can make free changes however you like up until the season starts on Thursday, I believe is when it locks, or Wednesday night. I don't know exactly when Sleeper does it, but I know it's when the season begins.
Game time Thursday, as of kickoff.
Yeah.
The taxi squad locks.
So draft pick trading, I wanted to make sure everyone understands how the draft pick actually comes into play. When you trade a draft pick, you're giving the pick assigned to your roster to another team. So if I traded my first round pick to Steve now has my pick. But if Steve decides to package my pick with a trade with Casey, then he's giving my first round pick to Casey, not his first round pick.
I could be giving both potentially.
Well, he could be giving both potentially, but let's say in this hypothetical situation, he takes the first round pick I gave Steve to Casey.
And Casey has Scott's first rounder.
He will have my first rounder, correct? Which means when you receive a pick in a trade, you need to pay attention to the team who owns that pick originally so that you can determine the potential value in that pick. Because not all picks are created equal. Because we determine the draft position by reverse order of standings, a team that is bad perennially will have a higher draft capital than a team that does well.
They'll get a better pick.
If Steve's team
like the same NFL,
is a killer and he trades you my team's pick and my team is trash, and he gives you his first round pick too, Steve's first round pick is going to be bad because it's going to be at the lower end towards the, 10 to 12 range because his team's good, and my pick's going to be good because my team's bad.
Yeah.
So everyone needs to make sure that when they're making trades involving picks, that they're paying attention to the team who originally owned the pick. And Sleeper makes that clear in the draft pick list, and in the draft or trade package that you're looking at. It'll show in parentheses the name of the team that originally owned
Whose
that pick.
picks it originally was.
Right.
Yeah.
So that's definitely something that's going to be very important in this dynasty league. Is trading your draft capital is going to be a way for teams that are doing really good to go out and push trades over the edge with teams that are in the process of rebuilding. Maybe they realize they're not in it and they're going to be in the toilet bowl at the end of the season, and they want to trade away their second best running back to a team that is making a push for playoffs, and they can get some draft capital out of it.
Maybe they
we'll know by November where people really sit.
Exactly.
Essentially, because like, who's going to be hurt the most?
Unfortunately, we're going to be right around the trade deadline when we know, for players at least.
Well, that's how it is,
We
right?
can
That's
trade picks. I guess in packages however we want after that, but yeah, just for players.
Well, in the off season, you can do anything you want, and
Right.
that's going to be the most fun, I think, when it comes to this season, because this is going to feel like a super redraft this year. But once the Super Bowl happens, you're going to realize fantasy football is not over. You're going to be looking at scouting reports for the draft, and you're going to be thinking
watching
about
a bunch of college highlight reels.
Yeah, you're going to be like, dude, what happened in the college playoffs? You're going to be watching the Senior Bowl, trying to figure out who the next guy is, and scouting your own players, and that's going to be really exciting because you have skin in the game because you have a dynasty team that you control, and you need to think about this stuff. Whereas with redraft, it's just like as soon as your team's out of playoffs, for a lot of people, it's just like, well, that's enough. That I'm done with football. But that's also why I warned everybody before we got into this that this is going to be pretty serious and involved, and that people are going to be trying really hard to win, and that you have to really kind of care about the game of fantasy, because this is a year-round thing that you're going to be doing for ages, like many years. So I'm excited for that. Personally.
Yeah, me too.
I think that's going to be awesome. I think that it'll make the redraft leagues that we play in more competitive because we have more seasoned players, and I think that's.
I don't know.
It's exciting for me. I'm stoked, man.
Yeah.
I've been wanting to do this for a long time, so I'm looking forward to it.
Any favorite matchups this week? What do you think?
Like real NFL matchups?
No, from our group of people we got here. What team do you think, besides obviously the Joe Josh?
I'm honestly the most interested in following Danny and his
me too.
team because Danny is the person who has the least experience in fantasy football, but he's also managed to be the team that is projected to score the most points in week 1. So I'm really interested to see what ends up happening with that team. Like we talked about earlier, like even though he does have a player that is probably not going to end up playing, that's a major part of his roster, Cooper Kupp, I am impressed with his draft, despite the fact he's only played the game for 1 year and hasn't.
That may be a bit of an advantage.
His team is scary. Yeah. Because he has no allegiance, right? Like we all kind of have player allegiances and like people we like to watch.
Right.
Yeah.
Teams that we like to watch. We have players that we've drafted in the past that we're like super high on that aren't that have been struggling. Kyle Pitts that you really want to see do well. And it's just like Danny just goes in there and he's kind of got like me and Steve's friend Amy, who when she first started playing fantasy football, she just drafted the guy she thought was hot, and she ended up winning the league, and she didn't know anything about fantasy.
Yeah.
So like Danny's kind of got that edge where it's like he's just like, this is his second year, and I just kind of proposed this as something that he might be interested in doing because he seemed to really pick up redraft really quickly, and then he was like, yeah, man, this is awesome. Like I'll play Dynasty. That sounds fun. Even though
wonder if
I
he's-
told him, I was like, look, dude, it's gonna be hard and it's challenging and it's
I
you have to
wonder
be
if
kind of a
he's
nerd.
fucking been playing Dynasty for like 5 years and he's just like gonna shark that.
Danny's not Nile, dude. He's not sandbagging.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, yeah, for real.
those of you who don't know, Nile was a player who always acted like he had no idea what he was doing, but he knew what he was doing.
He was
Yeah, no kidding. I'm sad that Niall isn't in the Dynasty League in a lot of ways because I feel like
he said he
had
was
one of
thinking
the-
about coming back.
I feel like we had a good rivalry.
A lot of us did. A lot of us were
Yeah.
like, dude, I can't handle Nile.
Yeah,
But
I
he's gone.
liked going up against him. Yeah,
That brings me.
I did not like going up against him at all. He knew way too much about the numbers and was
It's
able to
true.
crunch time shit that I would have never even thought of.
oh
It's
yeah.
true.
I mean, the perennial point score lead just got wrecked constantly.
I also want to point out another matchup I'm really interested in seeing is your buddy Ben and Casey's matchup this week,
Oh yeah,
because
Yeah.
I feel like both of these guys kind of have the same idea with their teams. I think that the players that they ended up picking were really safe and really good. And I think
Yeah.
that they're probably going to end up being one of those teams that,
Trying for
this is going
consistency.
to end up being one of those matchups where it's like the Monday night game on the final play determines the winner.
yeah.
Yeah, but is
So-
Casey really gonna start Rashad Penny?
I mean,
think so.
Yeah.
No way.
No,
he,
but
he has
there's
Bijan
definitely-
Robinson sitting on his bench right now. Like
Oh,
there's
what the fuck?
there's no way.
Yeah, no.
There's no way by the time he's gonna blow him out. In my opinion, Casey's gonna blow out
Or
Ben.
maybe
Unless
Casey
Ben
knows
makes some
something
moves.
you don't
Here's-
know, Trevor.
here's the deal.
Hell no, bro.
No. Casey doesn't even look like he's trimmed his roster down yet.
No, he hasn't. He hasn't
So,
even.
like, he needs to handle this so that, because all right, I see what's going on here. Yeah,
Yeah.
there's that's a
See,
very different scenario.
Casey's
Yeah,
strategy
Penny
is
doesn't
clearly play the safe game, and that's always the way he's
Yeah.
played. He's
Yeah.
gonna wait until the season starts, see how his guys are, and then make cuts. He doesn't want
Yeah.
to react too quickly like I do, and then fuck up my team. He wants to wait until the teams have played and he has a couple injured guys or whatever after the week 1 carnage, because like this is the real preseason. Let's
He
be
does
honest.
need to manage his cut down Debo because otherwise he's not going to.
I mean, he's taken a 0 currently at one position, but regardless, I assume he's going to fix his roster by the time he gets to game
that
day.
is a requirement.
And most likely, knowing
Where-
your
where's
buddy
he
Ben,
taking
he's going to take a
zero?
0 somewhere and have that super painful Joe style fucking play where it's like,
Oh yeah,
is this guy playing? Is he hurt? Like, what happened? And then it ends up coming
No,
out after the
I mean-
game.
Well, that's what you get for picking Jordan Love, okay? That's not our fault. Casey's sandbagging him right now. Like he thinks he has a chance, and Casey's gonna pop
Yeah,
Bijan in, and it's just
Yo.
not even gonna be a game.
That's true.
Like, look, Leonard Fournette sitting on this roster.
This is like when Josh will bench his entire team.
Yeah,
knowing
for the
that-
the whole week before,
the
so you
whole
have
week,
no idea
and
who's
then
gonna play.
like 5 minutes before the game, put all of his players in just to psych you out.
Yeah, like
I'm watching you, Josh. I know your strategy,
I've seen it
bro.
all before.
I know we've seen this before.
we know what you're doing.
We know what you're doing.
That being said, I mean, the defenses here are really interesting to look at in terms of what
Mine sucks so bad.
No, I mean
and
in terms of the Ben versus Casey matchup,
oh, and the Ben versus Casey matchup.
because there's really like,
Yeah, well, because neither of them know it, so it's like,
well, and no, but Casey has a lot
Hey.
more star power, is what it looks like. I mean, aside from Aiden Hutchinson, is what I would really say. But like Sam Hubbard could really put some damage.
Well, for the
On-
audio listeners, we should say like it's Adam. It's okay. So we got
Aiden Hutchinson,
say it out.
Alex Highsmith,
So Ben
Sam
has these
Hubbard.
players. So it's
yeah,
Ben's
these
players
guys.
are
E. Warner, AJ Terrell, and Pat Surtain. And then Casey has Frank Warner, Josh Allen, currently Matt Judon, Levante David, Minka Fitzpatrick, and Yoquan Brisker. And like, I would definitely say that Casey has more of the star power here, but in terms of IDP scoring, I think Ben's players could definitely give him a run for his money.
So your prediction is
like
that the defenses are going to make and break this matchup.
I think pretty much, because I think that like outside of that Bijan mismatch, these are pretty standard looking.
So there you have it. The two matchups we're going to be watching this week is going to be Casey and Ben and Josh and Joe. Yeah.
I'm interested to watch the Josh and Joe matchup. Those are going to be the ones we're going to watch the close.
I really think that Denver's cornerbacks can make a real big game out of this, especially with Garoppolo coming back, off of injury for the first time and having really limited action in preseason. I think that the defensive backs in Denver could really have a game and make his life hell, especially having not seen so much action recently.
All I gotta say is Sleeper is over projecting the Seahawks game. Ain't no way Van Jefferson's getting 10 points with the backfield that we have right now. Ain't no way.
Dude, I think the projections are screwed up.
They're all messed up.
I think it's messed up.
I think that they are probably projections for more traditional scoring.
Yeah.
No, it's literally based on the statistics from betting lines for these players. That's always how these projections work. It factors in your league's scoring.
Yeah.
But and it's not based on a arbitrary point value. It's based on their actual statistics applied to your scoring format.
Is there a way we can nerf Pat Mahomes, dude?
I mean,
we had like a Pat Mahomes rule in where he gets like -5 points every week or something.
There's never been. So if you don't know about Wayne Gretzky in fantasy, this is a good moment to bring it up. Wayne Gretzky was so dominant in hockey, in the fantasy hockey sport specifically, that they had to split him into two players. It was Wayne Gretzky goals and Wayne Gretzky assists. He was that good, and he was always like one of the top players, if not the top player picked. And he was two players. I would think it would be so awesome if there was a fantasy football player that was that prolific that we had to do that. Pat Mahomes could get there.
No, he could drop 40 points every week in our league.
It has to be the two-way guy. The first real two-way guy in the NFL, like a receiver and cornerback. The shutdown
corner and the god-tier wide receiver. The guy that can play a whole game.
Play a whole game. Yeah, like that dude is going to be the one who
So basically you're talking about the Shohei Ohtani of football. That's what we're looking for here.
Yes, I am. Yes, that's what I'm.
One day, man.
I mean, like, it could happen. I'm
here for it. And he won't be a Packer.
Like that have
he'll be Devin Witherspoon, dude. It's gonna be Devin Witherspoon watch, dude.
I mean, who knows?
No, he'll be on some dog shit team like the Lions or the Texans,
or the Browns,
or probably more appropriately the Falcons, and they'll never win a Super Bowl with him. It'll be like that.
So sad.
I mean, we've seen like kind of these. I mean, not necessarily multi-directional, but like people who've overlapped with special teams and
oh yeah, that happens all the time.
I mean, that's one of the God, I keep forgetting his name, but there's this kid in Colorado who played pretty much a whole game both ways, and played great both sides of the ball, wide receiver and cornerback. I gotta figure out who this kid is.
It's so hard to be.
I mean, it's gonna be impossible to maintain that strain too. There's like a whole game of action.
You get one Bo Jackson a generation.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Right. But like, I'm just thinking about like doubling the wear and tear on your body. Right.
Yeah.
So it's straight doubling it.
That's why athletes like Shohei Ohtani are such a spectacle. It's like, dude's literal unicorn. And I think the only one we have right now in football is Patrick Mahomes. He's the only one that's just like That's unreal. What
He
he does,
does
like he
crazy
just goes out there and he throws like across his body, sidearm with his eyes closed, jumping and
makes,
nails
like,
a
Travis
40
Kelce.
yarder to Travis Kelce, and it's like
crazy contortionist
what do you do
throws.
against that as a defensive
Travis
coordinator? It's just like sack him.
Yeah, I don't know.
Like,
Don't let him get in the air.
don't let him do anything.
Let him escape.
And then you
Like,
have to get
you're
past
playing-
that elite, like top
you're playing prevent
3
pass
offensive
rush.
line to do it, you know.
Yeah, right.
But
You're
yeah,
playing prevent pass rush against some of the best OLs in football. Fuck me.
right.
Which we haven't seen a good D end or D lineman since in my opinion, Khalil Mack.
Well, do you
When
think
he was
part of
doing
that
the-
has to
when-
do with the fact that they keep messing with the rules to make it so that defensive players can't tackle?
It's the so
think
the
it's
below the waist rule kind of messed with it a little bit. The you can't touch the hat, you can't touch their hats anymore at all, even on accident. You can't touch
You
their
can't
hats, that's a
land on top of
penalty.
them.
Can't land on
Like you
top
can't
of
sack
them.
them. You can't. What's his quarterback
I think-
sack now? It's like
I think really
They always neuter the defense every year just a little more, which is kind of why we have these extremely high scoring offensive games. But it always goes back and forth. It's going to be generational, right? Like we'll overcorrect the other way eventually, but it's do we want our offensive players to stay healthy, or do we want our defenses to be more of the game? And I think the NFL has gone the way of it's way more fun for people who don't know football to watch the offense score. So
Right.
they just neuter the defense every year.
I think there's definitely an element of that, but I also think that like the really rapid change in the rules has hindered defensive coaching because you're still having guys coming through systems that were brought up from the base level, taught now the wrong thing for the NFL, and that's being recoached.
Well, it's
like, as
stopping
long
a
as
lot
they
of the
can
people from even
actual-
wanting to play defense.
That's true. That is also true.
They want to just play offense. They want to be the guys that get the glory. Who wants to be
there's
on the
some-
side of the ball that never gets any credit?
Yeah.
Unless you're just an absolute savage. People like Aaron Donald who don't care. They just want to eat your lunch. Like people like that.
Right. I mean, there's definitely a place for star defenders in media and stuff, but
It's just not as big. It's not as big as offense, and it never has
They're always
been.
going to be in a local market instead of a national market.
Yeah.
I mean, that's the deal. Unless
like
you're
if you
heavily-
ask like a fan, like a fan who watches 2 games a season, they watch the Monday night football game that their team is playing in, or like the Thanksgiving game and the Super Bowl.
Right.
Who is the best defensive player? They're not gonna know.
They don't know.
They're gonna be like, you're gonna ask them like, do you know who Aaron Donald is? And they're just gonna give you a blank stare.
Maybe.
And then if you ask him,
No, because he's so popular, they're gonna be
No.
like, you mean that big scary guy that
you think that, but like the average NFL fan who watches 2 games a
No,
season,
they won't know who Nick
They'll say-
Bosa is.
The guy
They
from
won't know Vita Vea. They won't know Montez Sweat, but they will know Aaron Donald's probably the only defensive player that is like
See, I disagree. I think that the
nationally
average person
known.
doesn't know who the hell that guy is.
he's kind of an anomaly in my opinion. And
don't
that's just
think
maybe
so.
that's just my opinion. I think he's kind of an anomaly.
You're biased, for sure.
Yeah, because I'm a D lineman. I fucking
you
love
like,
D lineman.
You like defense, but like the average football watcher who watches 2 games a season, they won't know who that is.
I
You
mean,
ask them,
even-
like, do you know who Tom Brady is? They'll be like, oh yeah, I know who
Tom
Brady
Brady.
is.
Yeah. I mean,
That doesn't exist for defense.
getting someone
One
to be
day.
a defensive football player ever is hard.
I mean, what can you even do? Because in my opinion, I hate watching these cornerbacks just go for the ankles. Because it's like, I look at
I
that, I'm
hate
just
it.
like knees, ankles, like, and then they get all twisted up into a scrum, and it's like,
Yeah. It's like, oh, cool.
that looks
Just-
bad. But then
Well,
at the
and-
same
but-
time, you watch footage from the 80s, and these guys are like, they're getting their bell rung, they say, but it's like,
Yeah.
They're getting concussed.
they're getting concussed, like they're getting brain damage.
Well,
You're
so a lot of it
watching
came
brain
from
damage.
the defenseless receiver thing, right? So they overcorrected, said you can't hit them while they're not looking. You have to hit them from the waist down. and blah blah blah. Well, then they recorrected, said, okay, well you can hit them in the chest, but you can't hit them while they're not looking. And so now, I think right now where our rule set is in the NFL, because they can square up now, and you're gonna see more better form tackling today than you did last year, in the year before that, and the year before that, because they are allowed to hit now. They're just not allowed to hit them in the head. Heads off limits. They can completely off limits. That's like, and I understand why, because I mean I played.
What is the? I think it's called targeting. That's what the penalty is, or hit to the head or something.
I mean, targeting's like targeting's a college call.
I think it'll be pass interference. It'll be a subset of pass interference.
Or leading with the head, I think is what they call for that kind of a tackle. Because it used to be, I remember it used to be. They would teach to lead with the crown of your helmet.
Now.
Well, kinda. It wasn't really the crown. So the crown, they stopped doing that in the early 2000s. It was right here. They wanted you to lead with your eyebrow. Right. So you want your head up, right? But they want you to. They wanted you to hit right here.
You're naturally going to kind of go over them more than like into them, which is the idea there. But I mean, that's a big part of what I was trying to say earlier, is that like the coaching for the defensive side, because it's changing so fast in the NFL, can't catch up with the junior levels as quickly, and so you still got a bunch of these players falling in that weren't trained up right for the current thing, and so it makes it just difficult to play, and that's discouraging on top of it. As long as
it's a personal regardless, it's a personal foul now, right? Yeah. So it's just 15-yard personal foul.
Yep.
The new rule that I noticed that was called a couple of times during the preseason was the low block, and that used to just be on like a kickoff or a punt. You saw that, but and chop blocks, right? But now even low blocking, you can't do that during a regular play, and I love that, because linemen going for another lineman's knees is so, in my opinion, unethical, because they're 300-pound men.
Yeah, you don't want to flip them up. Yeah. That's not good.
Yeah, so they're getting more down to better form tackling, better form blocking, rather than it being go for the knees, like these wrestling coaches that came in and fucked up the whole game. It's starting to kind of go back to the way it should be. It's just going to be better form tackles. You'll see better form.
Yeah, I think that's good for the game, ultimately.
You won't see these cheap shot leg hits or anything like that, in my opinion. I think it'll get better over the next 5 years.
I just see a lot of that, and it makes me nervous, because I think
I hate it.
It's bad for the game, because people get injured.
The players hate it.
You're swinging people, the whole body mass is swinging down right into the ground at that point, and you're going to be swinging the head down and going whoop, whoop.
Yeah, you're going to get bad knee hyperextensions. You're going to get torn.
You're getting a lot more soft tissue injuries.
What is that happened to Achilles, to Sherman, the Achilles stuff?
Achilles tendon.
Yeah, Achilles got torn.
Yeah.
Ugh. Don't wish that on anybody. It's a terrible thing.
So do you guys have any other topics that you wanted to bring up during the inaugural episode?
How about the fact that we don't have kickers? Isn't that great, guys?
Oh yeah, fuck a kicker. There is no kicking in this. We may
those guys are weirdos.
But
those guys eat their own boogers.
So
if we can figure out how to score punters, I will advocate for them.
No more hunting for Justin Tucker, okay? So, thank God.
Kickers have no value. I'm sorry. They have no value. They have no place in fantasy. They should never be in fantasy. They should go away. They're great for the real game. The problem is they have no value.
In fantasy.
32 teams that have a valuable kicker. You're not going to get any value from trading away the best kicker in the league comparative to what he is. It's just not fun. In my opinion, we're not playing with them. And I'm glad that we're not playing with them. I'm sorry to everyone who loves kickers, but they're for redraft.
It's ultimately a very simple thing, and I mean, it just doesn't make sense for Dynasty,
supply and demand.
because
There's a lot of supply, and the demand is too little for it to really be relevant. And it's kind of the same issue with quarterbacks. And the reason why people like super flex leagues where you can start a quarterback in your flex is because quarterbacks kind of suffer from the same problem where there's too many quarterbacks available and not enough,
only the top 3 score.
And there's not enough teams that need to start a quarterback for them to be viable. As a player that you start or draft super early, you know.
Again, I'll bring this up. Once we went to the pro offensive league of the NFL, and it was no longer defensive, kickers became less and less viable. Because if you watch the Seahawks now, or any good defensive teams, you'll notice the game is decided by a kick. It's always decided by a field goal.
Yep.
When it's two really good defenses just moshing on the offenses, it always comes down to who has the best kicker. And you'll see them kick like 3, 4, 5 field goals.
Yep.
You know? But that doesn't happen as much anymore because we don't have as many run offenses. We don't have as great of defenses anymore.
The offensive skew in the NFL is clearly apparent.
Well, regardless of that fact, the kickers that you can put on your team and actually use in fantasy are super limited in terms of their viability as a part of the game, because you could just pick one off the waiver wire every week.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. They're not viable in fantasy anymore.
Right.
It used to be like that.
You're right. It used to be that it mattered which.
It mattered a whole lot more,
right? And
because you picked a matchup.
Kind of
it's not really like that though, because you used to be able to pick a kicker where their matchup would be. You knew that this team was going to be kicking 4 times.
I mean, it's this at this point. You just expect 4 to 8 points. Like roll a d4. That's your kicking bonus to your points, and that's like what you get. Like, and is that a real addition? I don't know.
My issue really isn't so much that aspect of it. It's that everybody in the league, every single team in this 12-team league, if we had kickers, could viably just play a kicker from the waiver wire every week.
There's no scarcity to it. There's
Whereas
no reason
with
to
quarterback,
trade anything.
it's kind of like that. But also not, because you want the top end option. Whereas with kicking, aside from Tucker, like
there's no other.
There's not a lot of difference between the 5th best kicker and the 16th best kicker. It's basically the same.
There's no real reason to go like target Texans kickers or Carolina's kicker or the Falcons kicker or whatever. Like, it's not like you're out here trying to get these bad offenses good kickers situations, because I mean, and this is actually a tribute to the kicker scoring that we've had in the other leagues, is that we've narrowed the parity between field goals and extra points so that it really has cheapened the need of kickers.
Especially because when they miss, it doesn't really affect it unless it's from far out or from close. Sorry,
narrowing the window of their hits and kickers.
Well, that was why in the redraft league that I run, I set that is to make kickers more interesting. But I ended up creating a monster I hate. So
yeah,
I forever regret that decision.
Oh well.
But we live with it. But it's not going to be in this dynasty league ever. So
no, there will be no kicking.
Instead, you get these ridiculously streaky defensive players that are going to drive you fucking nuts.
Yeah, it's going to drive you wild. Have fun.
Yeah, I'm excited to see.
Predicting what's going to happen with your defensive players.
But that's why I'm glad that we have the redraft leagues, because people can enjoy their kickers in a different format that I don't have to worry about in the off season. So
yeah,
there's that.
Yep. We'll figure out a golf league so that you can get your kicker out of your system if you want to really get down with it.
I brought up this idea of the golf league where you play fringe players or players who are legitimately just awful at football, not just injured guys, but like players that are just bad but somehow on an NFL roster,
like Baker Mayfield.
You play the top picks would be like quarterbacks that throw lots of picks, like crab legs.
Jameis
Mr. Jameson,
Yeah.
Jameis Winston.
Mr. Jameis Winston, back in the day, would have been money.
He would have been so good.
'Cause, like,
So good. Throwing 7 picks real quick.
Because like you
Like-
want to get those players, or like Melvin Gordon last year,
Hit
fumbling
that-
at the one twice in a game. Like those are the players that you want in the golf league.
Hit that Shane Zylstra.
Yep.
You want the Butterfinger people.
You want the Butterfinger, the guys, and unfortunately, this is one stat Sleeper can't score, but drops.
I was gonna say,
Like,
do they have drops?
yeah.
Because
You
if
get
they had drops, you could get -1, -1 every drop,
Oh man,
They
or
do
minus a half a
have-
point.
did they not score that?
Anyway, the golf league. Trevor's gonna be the commissioner.
We'll
It's been
try and
decided.
figure it out.
It'll be the first league
Yeah.
Trevor's ever run, and it's going to be the
gonna
most
run it.
bricked up thing ever. But anyway, I was going to say the scoring in Sleeper does have a setting for, I think it's receipt or passes that didn't get complete. It's incompletions.
Incompletions.
Yeah,
Okay.
so if you have give -1 for incompletions, you want the quarterback that goes has like
7 and 17.
yeah, they have like a 50% completion.
This year. This is
Yeah.
where Fields was meant to shine.
The problem with Justin Fields is that he's an
He
absolute
runs
beast.
too much. Yeah.
So maybe in 4 years, if he's still trying to run and he can't throw still.
Yeah.
But yeah, Melvin Gordon last year was like the man for this league.
What a golf.
But the rule is like you have to start a player, right, that's rostered. You can't just there has to be a way to do it so that if a player gets 0 points, they get like 10 or something. Because you want to try and the idea is to score as
You gotta
little
get
as possible.
the-
So it's
yeah.
a fairly conventional scoring
I
system.
mean, you want the Josiah Jaguaras out there that are going to go for 3 yards, and then that's going to be it because they're fullbacks.
Yeah.
And
And then you really don't want them
you're gonna
in
have an
goal-to-go
0.3.
situations. You're like, no.
No, get out of here.
Get him out of here.
Bring the running back
You're
in.
Xander Horvaths of
None
the
of your
world.
Xander Horvaths. None
Yeah.
of you Shane Zylstras.
You want the guy that gets put in for like a play and doesn't do it and fumbles and then gets pulled.
Like Clyde Edwards-Helaire, it would be your favorite running back ever.
He's coming back, I swear.
No,
the
he's
pass
not.
catcher.
He's not coming back.
Probably not.
Or Kadarius Toney, that'd be a great receiver for you in this league.
Oh, yeah.
I don't think you get
that-
points for injuries. So
But he only
I don't
gets
know how well that would work.
he only gets like 2 to 4 points when he does play.
True.
You know what I'm saying?
But he also
So-
might go what was that one game he went like
Pop
like,
off and get like 18 points.
he went like 189 yards and 2 touchdowns or something against the Giants. Or not the Giants because he was on the Giants. Who I think it was the Cowboys or somebody. And
I can't remember.
he just went
against
absolutely crazy. And his entire draft
Wasn't
capital since then has been based on that one game.
It was against Washington.
Was it Washington?
I think it was a divisional
I can't
game.
remember. All I remember is that he scored a
pretty
bajillion
sure.
points. I
Yeah, he
spent
scored like
I spent
50
like
points
28 fab on him and he didn't do shit. So
forever.
that's what I
Yeah, no.
remember about
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Kadarius Toney that year.
Yeah, no, he
just
blew
went
up for
8.
one,
Yep, one game.
and it was because Washington's top.
And then he had that interview later
movies
where
were-
he had his jersey pulled up over his head or whatever. Or he had that weird like
his
The hoodie.
thing,
was
the
doing
hoodie
opposite.
that's
Yeah.
like goes over his head, and he was like looking cracked out, and it was like, "I'm the assassin." And he just like, I love that dude. After that, I was like, "This is my guy. This is my fantasy player right here." And then he just did nothing, and I was like,
He was
"This is a
menace.
typical Scott pick."
He
This
was a
guy's
menace
trash.
for one game. And
Yeah, I
then-
should have just traded him to you that one year because
one
you're so
game,
high
he was
on
a
him.
menace for one game against backups.
I've learned my
And then-
lesson.
And then he, yeah. Time has told it to.
Well, I think that about wraps it up for this week, right?
Yeah, I think
think
that
so.
we've got a good upcoming week here. Finally, football's back Thursday. It's
Yeah.
Kansas City and Detroit.
Yo, that's gonna be a good
It's
game.
gonna be a pretty fun one, and there's a lot of fantasy relevance going on in that game
Yep.
too. I mean,
Finally, the
Mahomes,
opening game is a good game and not
and we
something,
get to
not the Cowboys or
we get
something.
to see some fun fantasy relevant
No.
rookies in Laporta and Campbell, who are likely to be relevant for our league. In the Thursday night game, so that's something to look out for. I don't know if there's
There's a
anybody
lot
on
of
Kansas.
rookies on both teams. Like you're
I
gonna
don't
be
know.
looking like is Justin Ross gonna put it
Oh
together?
yeah, that's
Because like if you didn't know, this
Ross.
Justin Ross kid I think is a good sleeper pick.
He could definitely turn into
I
something.
believe he had some rare heart condition that really messed up his, like he was projected going to be a
First
high end
round.
draft pick.
Yeah.
And he ended up with this super rare disease or problem with his heart, if I remember correctly, something with his central nervous system. And he's made it back, and he's on a team.
Yeah.
And he's a freak. Dude,
He's
like
stayed-
if you
well, no,
look
he's
at his
still with-
highlights, it's like,
I mean,
damn.
the Chiefs kept him for a reason, you know. They
Yeah.
stashed him on IR, but they kept him around because, I mean, kid still wants to play football, and it's like an amazing success story for him to have come back at this point, and definitely wish him the best. But yeah,
I believe Ben rostered him during the startup draft. So anyone that went to minimize this and go look for him, he's taken. But I'm sure Ben would be looking to trade him if you're interested.
I mean, there's always the offers you can make, right?
And then on the other side of the ball, I think the running back situation in Detroit getting cleared up in that first game is going to be really, really interesting. As well as in other teams too.
Look, there's not much consideration there, right? I mean, we're going to be seeing.
They have a couple good options. I think Jahmyr Gibbs is going to be the clear guy, but like
I mean,
every year with these high end draft picks,
rookie running backs always
you see another rookie come in and look really good, like we saw with Carson. Chris Carson years
Ken
ago
Walker?
with the Seahawks.
Oh yeah, sure. Years ago,
he was like a 6th round pick, like a late round guy, and he ended up being a really good running back for them. So
I think the hindsight there
that could happen with Jahmyr Gibbs, man. He could get usurped.
I think absolutely Gibbs could take the starting role, but I don't think it happens until week 6.
Well, this happened with Spencer Ware, the Kareem Hunt situation.
That's right.
Was wild because he had Spencer Ware, who was supposed to be the guy.
He was going to be a dude for a while.
And then that first game where he was out and Kareem Hunt came in and basically he fumbled his first NFL touch. His very first NFL touch, Kareem Hunt fumbled the ball and then went off. I think he had like 3 touchdowns and over 100 scrimmage yards. And the rest is history.
He absolutely went
so
off.
like this stuff happens every year.
Moved on.
So I love watching rookie running backs in their first games because that's always like a tone setter. The Breece Hall last year was the same situation. It was like, dude's high draft capital, and he was an absolute animal. And then he got hurt. And now look at him.
Slowly, and now, exactly. But he got hurt. So I still think Breece has a good way to come back. He was an absolute animal at Iowa State. And just ran roughshod with a Big Ten, and that's usually a pretty good indication of success.
And not to be a dick, but kind of my favorite thing to watch is all these super overhyped running backs that come into the league, like Saquon, who play one game and then never fucking did really touch it down for 2 years, and then now they're just kind of like this mid-tier running back that people think is going to do good every year, but still it's kind of just this mid-tier running back.
It's
the thing with Saquon though is that he's actually a good player. He's just like gets injured, and you can't.
He's glass.
You can't really like predict injuries, man. If he didn't get injured, you're talking about him as being like, look at
this isn't the only. Yeah, as I'm saying, all these super overhyped running backs that come into the league in their first couple of years, like Bijan Robinson. Let's see how long he lasts.
I'm
right now we're super hyped about Bijan, and he's like projected to be one of the best running backs in the league this year. Blah blah. He's gonna probably drop 20 points in our league the way we score it every game.
No,
But-
watch
Running back-
Arthur Smith use fucking what is it, Tyler Algier more than him.
Yeah, right. Like,
Cordero
back-
fucking Patterson.
Running backs are always a flash in the pan, and there's nothing like.
Not always, but usually.
There's nothing like. I mean, Derrick Henry is the exception, not the rule.
I mean, you
right.
got people like Dalvin Cook, Christian
Dalvin
McCaffrey,
Cook,
Austin
McCaffrey's,
Eckler.
all kind
Odell
of
Mixon.
perennial intrigue. kind of
The
issue.
thing is you have these
So-
guys that beat the scheme because like we've moved to this committee system across the league.
right?
Offensive coordinators are trying to preserve their guys as much as they can. You can
Big
see
guys,
that with what the Seahawks did drafting Zach Charbonnet in the second after drafting
Well,
Kenneth
Jackson
Walker in the
Walker
second last year.
Already now
And it
has
was
an
like
injury.
everyone in fantasy is like, "Oh my god, what's going on? What happened to my RB1 Kenneth Walker?" And it's like, dude, it's depth.
He just got injured.
Every team is doing this. They have multiple
Yeah.
guys.
You
They're
just lost
spreading it
one.
around.
it's
Some
not
guys are
just
just so good that they become the guy.
yeah.
And they
It
have
keeps
no
them
option.
healthy, and then it also throws a curveball at teams looking at them in film. Because
That's
now they
why-
have to worry about somebody else.
It's
That-
true.
That's why I was really confused by Royce Freeman's usage when he first came into the league because he was he looked amazing in college, and then all they did is just run him up the gut every single
Yeah.
play. It
I
was
mean,
like
it's-
Philip Lindsay in the backfield. They were gonna do some play action.
Oh, fuck.
They were gonna do
don't-
some
we
weird
don't need
scat
to
back
go
stuff.
over-
But then Royce Freeman's back there, and then they just stack the box, and it's like,
We don't- look,
and then now no one trusts
Denver-
him.
Yeah,
Because all
well,
the film is him running up the gut, and it's like that's not all he does. Maybe his vision
Denver-
is bad. There's a reason I'm at
Denver's-
home and not an NFL scout, but like
Denver's offensive struggles are
They're
many,
real.
varied, and very.
yeah, they got
real.
stolen by Seattle.
Yeah, I mean that first game last season was such a tone setter for Denver's season. To just get like walloped
like I
in the
had
mouth
said back
by
then,
Seattle,
Gino had to do one thing in Seattle, and that's beat Denver.
and
And then he
it's
could
true.
lose the whole rest of the year, and I wouldn't
He was
care.
playing with house money, and he knew it, and he played loose, and he played well. So, hope he can replicate it for y'all this
well, he
season.
has to replicate it this year if he wants to get paid because he took
Yeah.
a very generous salary. So we'll see.
Yeah.
Well, I think that about does it for our show. I
Yeah.
think that next week we'll have a more coherent conversation because we'll actually have some football to talk about and
We'll have
some
data. Yeah.
some data
And
to
we
look
won't be-
at and
won't
some
be,
shit to
like,
talk about how awful your
month
teams
and a
were
half removed from the draft,
and how terrible mine was. So
And,
we'll see.
We'll actually be able to talk about like some of those swingy standout defensive players we're predicting, and the mad rush to the bench. And
The mad rush to the wire.
Yeah, mad rush to the bench is what I'm going to be doing when all my guys get injured.
Yeah, well, and that's why
So.
we have IR slots. So
Which we might have to adjust. We'll see. It's 4. We might need more. I don't know.
Yeah,
We'll
might need more.
growing
might.
pains, guys.
we'll figure it out.
We'll figure
and that's
it
the
out for
thing.
sure.
These are all important considerations that we will not be adjusting in real time, but in
No,
each
definitely
off,
not. It will be an off-season thing.
that's we will be collecting them in real time, but we will not be adjusting or considering adjustments until the end of the season.
Yep.
All right, boys. It was a good
Don't
first
forget-
episode.
We done it.
We did it.
Defense wins championships,
That's right.
And
Defense
Steve
wins.
sucks.
and Steve sucks.
I can't let this be the sign off.
It is.
Oh, no.